Hi, everybody, and welcome to our lecture on evolutionary ethics. So I think you're going to find this section particularly intriguing. So I have an opening question for you. Can morality be explained by evolution? Evolutionary ethics explores the origins and function of morality through the lens of evolutionary biology and psychology. So our focus in this lecture will be to talk about what evolutionary ethics is, how it ties into naturalistic views of ethics, the philosophical implications, and we'll take a look specifically at methodical ethical naturalism and metaphysical naturalism. So a little historical background. As you might be thinking, Charles Darwin. So he first proposed that human moral instincts evolved. Next on was Herbert Spencer, who applied Darwinism to ethics, sometimes controversially. And then in the mid-20th century, we have the rise of sociobiology by E.O. Wilson, and later evolutionary psychology kind of reignites this debate. So evolutionary ethics is a field that seeks to understand our moral behavior as a product of evolutionary processes. So morality is then seen not as divine or rational imposition, but as an adaptive trait. So there are two main branches. One is the descriptive evolutionary ethics. This explains moral behavior through evolutionary history. Some example of this would be kin selection, reciprocal altruism, and group selection. Normative evolutionary ethics, our second branch, claims that what is morally right or wrong can be derived from evolutionary facts. Higher controversial would be the naturalistic fallacy concerns, which we'll dive into in a little bit. So metaphysical naturalism is the belief that only natural laws and forces operate in the world, that there is no supernatural realm. In this view, morality must be explained without invoking supernatural or metaphysical absolutes. That means in this, there is no God to consider. We aren't going back to any kind of divine command theory or anything outside of us that's in a spiritual world of any type. Instead, we are going to be looking for moral facts. If they exist, they should be discovered, natural facts, not revealed by some divine entity. Evolutionary ethics fits this model. Morality arises from natural selection, from cognitive evolution, and from social pressure. So methodical ethical naturalism, this is an epistemological stance. Epistemology is an examination in philosophy of knowledge and truth and where they come from. So in this sense, ethics can be used or should be used by using the methods of the natural sciences. So we can see this if you've taken an intro class throughout the centuries, that some philosophers appeal to the idea of method and that we can involve scientific principles in fact gathering, and that makes for better critical thinking. So ethical knowledge, like scientific knowledge, then should be empirical, which means based in experience. It should be testable, and we should be able to revise it. So we should be able to apply scientific methodology, scientific theory to a system of ethics. For example, studying Moral behavior of humans and primates might reveal shared evolutionary roots of empathy or fairness. Some important figures to consider were Richard Boyd, Peter Relton, and Sharon Street, and they all advocated various forms of ethical naturalism that was informed by empirical science. So some of the key concepts and thinkers, let's talk a little bit about those. Moral emotions as adaptations. So emotions like guilt, shame, and empathy enhance cooperation and social cohesion. Therefore, they evolved as we grew in our evolutionary way. Instead of being embedded in us, we were not born with them, but they evolved over time. An example of this would be how studies on primates show proto-moral behavior. Now, Sharon Street's Darwinian dilemma was that evolution can explain our moral beliefs, but this challenges their truth. So the dilemma then becomes either our moral beliefs are shaped by evolution and not tracking moral truth, or they track truth by coincidence, which is implausible. Now, Michael Roos and E.O. Wilson thought that morality is an illusion fobbed off on us by our genes to get us to cooperate. So this is all about our genes and our genes evolving, and how our genes help us to come to a sense of well-being. Richard Joyce said there is a moral error theory, and this says that evolution explains why we believe in moral truths, but that no such truth exists. So when we're talking about epistemology, and if you've taken an intro to philosophy class, you may have gone through some discussions and readings on whether or not truth exists and different types of truth. But truth is called into question here. Where does truth come from? Is it inherent? Is it external? Do we learn truth? Is truth coherent with the reality around us, or does it correspond to certain circumstances? And these are all questions we might ask ourselves about truth and moral theory. So let's visit some philosophical challenges and criticisms of the naturalistic fallacy. So just because something is natural doesn't mean it ought to be. An example would be altruism may evolutionarily be beneficial, but that doesn't mean it's morally right by itself. The is-ought problem discussed earlier by David Hume, where evolution describes what is, but how do we derive what it should be, what it ought to be? Then we also get into ideas on relativism again and on nihilism. If morality is an evolved trait that travels through time and we can become more and more morally evolved, is it objective, or is it just a product of survival strategies? So, can evolution ground morality? Moderate naturalism accepts this idea that evolutionary insights can inform our ethics, but doesn't fully reduce ethics to biology. Some propose a hybrid approach, that evolutionary science explains the origin of our moral instincts, but that philosophical reasoning refines them into coherent moral theories. So an example might be that we use evolution to explain why we care about fairness, for example, then use reason to decide how we should care by using principles of justice as an example. So in conclusion, evolutionary ethics offers a compelling and naturalistic explanation for our moral behavior. Metaphysical naturalism supports the idea that morality is not supernatural. Methodical ethical naturalism suggests we should study ethics scientifically, but there's this ongoing tension. Can we move from what evolution gave us to what we ought to do? So, some questions for reflection on our evolutionary ethics topic. Number 1, can moral realism survive evolutionary explanations of ethics? Number 2, is it problematic if our moral beliefs are shaped by survival rather than truth? And number 3, should ethics be treated like a natural science? So I hope you've enjoyed this short lecture on evolutionary ethics, and then you found some of the ideas interesting as we dive into our discussions this week.